All right, so I'm going to go over a couple of high-level, kind of advanced Unity topics. If you guys have any questions, we can certainly talk about those as time permits. So this is a talk on modifying your Xcode plist in Unity. What the heck does that mean, right? So if you've ever built an iOS app, you know that an iOS app has a plist. What's a plist? It's a property list. That means it's a list of everything that your app has that you can configure. So if you want to enable bitcode, if you want to, I don't know, include core data, whatever you want to do, it's in that list, right? So we need to modify that list from Unity. Maybe we want to include a version number with every build that we make. Or maybe we want to add a new framework like core data. Maybe we want to enable bitcode. So why do this from Unity, right? There are certain settings for the plist that are just unavailable via the editor, and I'll show you, I'll go through this in just a second. Oftentimes you need to modify that to make your game work. So for example, bitcode. Bitcode is disabled by default in Unity. What is bitcode? Well, in the future, Apple says, hey, you built this app, and we changed our processor architecture. You don't have to do a single thing to your app because you've enabled bitcode. We're going to take care of that for you. We're going to slice your app for you. We're going to optimize it for you. That's not enabled by default. There's a way to turn that on. The same thing here, framework inclusion. Say I have a plugin that uses core data. I don't want to manually go add core data to my plist every single time I make a build. That's awful. Nobody wants to do that. Same thing with application versioning and then post-build processes. So to go in a little bit more detail as far as what all this stuff is and how you get to it in Unity. So here's your basic Unity project. Nothing special, we've all seen this 1,000 times. Typically when you go in here to build settings, you've got a limited number of settings in the player editor, or excuse me, player settings that you can modify. So down here I've got my bundle identifier, I've got my version, I've got my build, I've got all these little settings in here that some are useful, some are not, right? But inside your plist, you have unlimited number of settings that you can further use. Unity doesn't expose those for you. So you might say, well, how do I do that? How do I expose those settings? Let me go through some of those settings as well. So here in Xcode, this is a graphical representation of what's in your plist. So you'll see things like architecture, bitcode, which is what I just talked about. Under general, you might see your bundle identifier, your version, again, everything I just talked about from Unity. Like I said though, a lot of these things are not editable in Unity. So how do you solve that problem? Well, you write code. So this is a somewhat advanced feature of Unity. A lot of people don't use this.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Let's make this bigger. How's that? All right, cool. So, a couple things going on here. This is a post-process build. So whenever I build a project in Unity, I can run what's called a post-process. That means anything inside this static method gets called and we do stuff to my project. My project then gets bundled up. It then gets exported into an iOS Xcode project, right? So all we're doing here is we're saying, if your build target's not iOS, return. We don't really care. We're not modifying anything else but iOS projects. Get the path to the project, make what's called a new PBX project. The PBX project is documented in Unity's API. However, they don't give you a single example on how to work with it. It's fairly new to their framework. I think they introduced it around the end of Unity 4, and there's just not many examples on how you actually use it. So a lot of this is going to solve that problem for you. You want to grab your target, which is Unity iPhone, and let's say, like I said, you want to add core data to your project. So what do? You say, well, proj.add_framework to project, target, core data, and then true or false. Also, say I want to disable bitcode. In this example, I've actually enabled it, so I want to set the build property for bitcode to yes. That's the path to your plist here, and you're basically walking the plist to modify some of these paths and some of these values that you've specified up above. So you can see here that I've done things like I've set my bundle version, and I've set my build version, and all these different things. And you're probably saying, well, why is that important? Why do I really care about modifying the plist every time I build? Well, number one is to save time. If you think about this, you're building in Unity and you're building to an iPhone. Every time you do that, you have to run that through Xcode. That takes a tremendous amount of time. If you want to go in and edit your plist by hand every single time, and you want to change 15 different settings every time you make a build, I mean, you can do that. It's just going to take you a lot longer to make multiple builds and to get deployed on your device faster. The second thing is versioning. Let's say you have this project, and let's say it's on the Unity Cloud, and every time you pull from your repo, say you're using Perforce, you want to bump the version number of your project. How would you do that? You would modify the bundle version down there in the bottom where it says build key, CF bundle version. I've got it hard-coded to 22. Obviously, you can change it to whatever your build system supports, however you want to do that. So, when this is all said and done, the only thing you need to make sure you do as well is add your directive post-process build. There's a pre-process build and a post-process build. This is post. You've built your project, you want to modify your plist, you want to save everything, and then go from there. So what happens when you do this, right? You run this from within Unity, and we make a new build. Let's just pretend it builds. We'll go into Xcode, and you'll look at Xcode, and you'll see certain things are now modified. So if I go under General, now my build is number 22. The default build on just a standard Xcode project, 0, right? Version number, same thing. All of my frameworks down here at the bottom. So you can see the very last thing I added is core data. We can go into build settings and change things like bitcode, or, like I said, you can do anything you want to do in the plist. The plist is really just an XML file, but Unity doesn't provide that clear of a way to modify the plist. So that's a very high-level glance at what you can do to actually modify the plist. Certainly open for any questions if anybody's got any.
No, that's awesome stuff.
Yeah, it's a major.